Since 2011, an ongoing armed revolution known as the Syrian Civil War has been taking place in Syria. The conflict began with nationwide protests against President Bashar al-Assad's government, whose forces responded with violent crackdowns. The protests soon evolved into an armed rebellion.
Syria is a country that borders Iraq in the Middle East. It has been under the Assad government's control since March of 1971. The shaded yellow regions on the map are the approximate locations where rebel forces are present.
The armed opposition consists of various groups, including the Free Syrian Army, the Islamic Front, the Islamic State, and Hezbollah. The death toll surpassed 100,000 in June 2013, and by April 2014, the toll had risen over 190,000.
The rebel-held areas around Damascus, it's not changing.
I'm sorry. I did have slide all. I did it. Okay, let's start.
Oh, it's not.
gone mouse click. Oh. Well, what happened?
I had it set. I don't know. Maybe the transition of like the flash show.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, let's start on this one. This one right here. Is that good? Start on this one.
That one.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
The armed opposition consists of various groups, including the Free Syrian Army, the Islamic Front, the Islamic State, and Hezbollah. The death toll surpassed 100,000 in June 2013, and by April 2014, the toll had risen over 190,000.
In the rebel-held areas around Damascus, there are over 500,000 civilians who have little access to food and water. The people are starving, and food is very limited. In some cases, families only have cat and donkey meat to eat.
In the war, both sides have utilized food aid as a weapon. However, this tactic has mostly been used by the Syrian government. Regime soldiers and officials have stated in interviews that they aim to starve opposition fighters and their sympathizers into submission.
The rebels have placed landmines across a stretch of highway in Damascus, blocking access to aid for the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor. The mines have kept away trucks with chlorine needed to purify water in the region. There have been many other cases of food aid trucks not being able to reach their destination due to rebel and regime involvement.
Now, the definition of food justice is communities exercising their right to grow, sell, and eat healthy foods. So is it ethical to deprive individuals of food they need to survive as a means of war? And is it justified to deny individuals food until they submit to tyranny?
The answer is no. The Syrians do not have the ability to grow, sell, and eat healthy foods. Over 4 million Syrians are dependent on food aid due to the war's destruction. And it is very difficult and sometimes impossible for food aid to reach the areas where they are most in need.
In the war, hunger is a tool used to exploit the other side. In one truce, the regime won the surrender of fighters and heavy weapons for the release of prisoners and government-provided food. Also, a collection of rebel groups have starved regime soldiers trapped in military installations and civilians in communities thought to be unloyal.
NPR's Deborah Amos has been covering the Syrian civil war since it began. In the beginning, some rebel forces did supply food aid to areas under their control in order to get them to cooperate. However, now food aid is being provided by the U.S. to Syria, unmarked and delivered covertly across the border. Because these packages are not branded, some Islamic groups often take credit for the food that comes in.
The rebels have even used food as a strategy for recruiting fighters and gaining support. Food and water would be promised to starving communities in return for their loyalty. Men who are desperate to provide for their families will join the rebel army in return for food as well.
Intentional starvation can be a war crime, but when the issue is between two parties of one state, it is a political gray area. Government officials are not inclined to stop this heinous activity because they will suffer no real consequences in the eyes of the law.
Some critics are not so indecisive. Philip Luther, director of the Middle East and North African program at Amnesty International, believes that citizens being reduced to the most primitive methods of survival is a complete disregard for international humanitarian law.
From a medical perspective, the starvation of children has long-term effects that cannot be erased. The average survival rate for Syrian children ages 1 to 6 is between 10 and 20%. Even if they do survive, however, they will be faced with medical consequences for the rest of their lives.
Rebel forces often target bakeries and food distribution centers. Some citizens will risk their lives to wait in bread lines because there is no other choice. Those who attempt to provide aid also put their own lives at risk.
Though food availability fluctuates, when it is available, prices go spiraling out of control. Even then, the foods available are often dried and yield little nutritional value on their own. This is especially hard for families with young children or elderly people.
The destruction riddling the streets of Syria is abominable. Organizations have launched a record $6.5 billion humanitarian appeal to aid Syrians inside the country and refugees in neighboring countries. However, less than 1/4 of this money has been received.
Denying people of humanitarian assistance as a war tactic is unacceptable. Refugees and captives have been reduced to the very basics of survival. Though some food aid has been made available, the problem is only increasing daily.
In 2013, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees helped Syria by supplying blankets, tents, shelter, and other materials that were needed. However, some of the most desperate areas received no aid because the rebel population makes it nearly impossible to help.
This problem must be solved through unity. Intervention by the international community is the only way to stop the tyranny and restore ethicality to the treatment of others, even during war. We learn through history that genocides and crimes of war do not just affect one state, but the whole world. This cannot be ignored. Thank you.
Let's start with Olivia. So you just mentioned your solution is international.
Intervention.
Thank you. I lost the word. You must have come across in your research a lot of people who believe that that is not the way to go. So how did you handle different perspectives on whether or not the international community should get involved with Syria?
Well, there's a lot of debate going on, as you mentioned, about the involvement with Syria, but overall there's a lot of effort being put into helping Syria, but right now it's not effective because it is not a unified effort. It's mostly smaller organizations trying to help. So that's why I think that the unity issue is what will overcome those opposers in the debate.
Okay. And Raleigh, if you had more time, what additional research would you have done on this topic? Like, what did you feel was maybe a hole in your research or something else that you didn't have time for?
Well, I felt for myself, I wish that I could have gone deeper into the actual history of Syria, because then I could know where the country came from, so I can understand the problems that are going on today.